In arms race for air superiority, Russia challenges US hegemony. Moscow's expanding sales bring money and geopolitical influence with lands such as Egypt, Turkey, and Algeria. 5 years since its return to Middle East with a military base in Syria, Russia is moving into weapons market left vacant by the United States and boosting sales to traditional clients. Moscow's expanding arms sales brings money and geopolitical influence as it seeks to challenge US hegemony. And February 25, Russia officials announced that Egypt had received 5 Sukhoi Su-35 advanced multi-role fighter aircraft, the first of an order of 24. Egypt ordered the planes despite threats of US sanctions after Washington refused to sell Cairo its fifth generation F-35 bomber. Turkey, a NATO ally, is in talks with Russia to buy the Su-35 and eventually the state-of-the-art Su-57 fifth-generation combat plane after being shut out of the US F-35 program. On March 12, Russia announced it was ready to open official negotiations with Ankara and to help Turkey develop its own fifth-generation fighter TFX. Algeria, Russia's biggest customer in the MENA, is to receive 14 upgraded Sukhoi 34 light bomber jets this year, and it also responded interested in Su-35. Iran, an historic client of Russian weaponry since the days of the Shah, is free to consider Russian goods again since a decade-long UN arms embargo against the Islamic Republic expired in October. In part, Russia is marketing its weapons because they are a major source of foreign currency, experts said. Weapon exports are critical for Russian economy, unlike the US, which is such a huge market on its own that it doesn't really care about exports, said Gustav Tivas, professor of weapons system at the Hellenic Military Academy. Russia's share of global weapons export was 21% in 2015-19, making it the world's second largest exporter after the US, according to figures from the Stockholm International Peace Research and Institute, SIPRI. Egypt feels second best. The 1971 Camp David Accords, which awarded Israel diplomatic recognition from an Arab country for the first time, elevated Egypt to the status of a key US ally, since the US provided more than $80 billion in military and economic aid to Egypt. That changed in 2011 when the President Hosni Mubarak has deposed a popular uprising and a 2012 election saw Mohammad Morsi win. The US then withheld deliveries of weapons systems fearing a threat to Israel. Morsi's removal by a military coup after a year in office did little to assuage US concerns about underlying political instability, and there were added worries over President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's clampdown on the Muslim Brotherhood Morsi hailed from. Citing human rights abuses, the US suspended military aid to Egypt for 2 years with an estimated $1.3 billion a year. There is a position of the US against human rights problem in Egypt. Retired Egyptian Army General Gamal Mojouli told Al Jazeera, adding they must drop it. Since the new President Biden of the United States took office, he did not call President Al-Fattah el-Sisi. There is no connection between them at all. It is not good. Egypt's fall from grace now contrasts with the US-Israel relationship. In March 2011, as revolutions swept across North America and Syria, Israel announced it would buy 19 F-35s. Israel now has 2 combat-ready squadrons of 24 aircraft each, and in February approved the purchase of a third along with airborne tankers to increase their range. Egypt says former US President Donald Trump pledged to sell Cairo 20 F-35 aircraft when he met el-Sisi at the United Nations General Assembly on 24 September 2018. But it rechanged. There is a danger of COP that would produce a leader that threatens Israel. That's why Americans are proceeding slowly, said Aref Aldud, professor of geostrategy in the Middle East at the Hellenic Military Academy. Meanwhile, Washington appears to have replaced Egypt as the exemplary friend of Israel in the Arab world. Normalizing relations with Israel last September is unlocking diplomatic doors for the United Arab Emirates in Washington. The Trump administration informally notified Congress last year of its plans to sell 50 F-35S fighters to the UAE for 10.4 billion after Israel Premier Benjamin Netanyahu reported gave the sale a nod. During this period, Russia seized the diplomatic initiative and became LC's new interlocutor. Russia doesn't speak as if she expects something from human rights and so on, said the former General Majlou. In 2014, with US military purchase suspended, Egypt and Russia agreed on a 3.5 billion deal to supply Egypt with 46 Ka-52 attack helicopters and 46 MiG-29 fighters. In 2019, after Trump allegedly went back on his word at the United Nations, Egypt signed a $2 billion deal to buy Su-35 fighters. The Biden administration has now frozen the sale of F-35S to the UAE, a possible silent alarm at the prospect of new arms race in the Middle East that creates opening for Russia. Algeria seeks to avoid Libya's fate. Between 2010 and 2014, Algeria's defense budget almost doubled to 10 billion. The North African country, which also saw uprising during that period, is responsible for half of defense spending on the African continent. Perhaps this response is due to experience. In 1991, the Algerian government cancelled elections that would likely have been won by Islamic Salvation Front, declared a state of emergency and installed a military government to fight an armed uprising of the FIS and other groups. During a visit to Algiers in 2006, Russian President Vladimir Putin forgave the country's 4.7 billion debt in return for armaments contract worth 7.5 billion. Algeria, which spends 15.5% of its gross domestic product on defense, now appears to have geopolitical ambitions of its own in Mediterranean, powered almost exclusively by Russian weaponry. Turkey sees new friends. Turkey is transforming itself into a regional player through weapons exports, much like Russia. Its drones turned the tide of the Libyan war and the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Uzbekistan last year. In 2019, the US Congress sanctioned Turkey for purchasing Russian-made S-400 surface-to-air missiles, saying they pose a threat to the F-35 Turkey was contracted to co-produce with Lockheed Martin. Turkey will not be allowed to purchase 100 planes, and its defense industry will lose an estimated 10 billion in contracts to produce parts. Meanwhile, Turkey has been in open conflict with Greece over parts of the eastern Mediterranean, and Aegean and Athens is reaming as a result. Between June this year and June 2022, Greece will take delivery of 18 fourth-generation Rafale fighters from France. Another 6 may follow. Hellenic aerospace industry has also begun upgrading 85 of Greece's F-16 Block 52 fighters to Block 72 Viper level, essentially making them fourth-generation planes. Both the Rafale and the Viper will outclass Turkey's standing fleet of an estimated 236 aging F-16s. When the Rafale enters service in few months, Turkey will have a serious problem in the balance of power vis-a-vis Greece, and if the American embargoes spare parts of the existing F-16s, then the problem will become extremely serious, at least for the medium term, said Grevas. If it buys Sukhoi, it will much more decisive step away from Western architecture than the S-400 purchase. We are at the start of a Cold War. Turkey's move may be an irreversible rift with the West, but he also believes there is an opportunity for peace. While Greece enjoys a competitive edge in the Aegean, the two countries could yet settle their outstanding maritime difference, he said. As the Mediterranean conflict simmers, however, the Russia sensed an opportunity to coax a key NATO ally on its own orbit. Russia is offering to co-develop the Su-57 with Turkey, which is Russia's most advanced plane. They are going to pull out all the stops when it comes to military cooperation with Turkey, said Aloyed. Thank you.